Welcome to the Thrive by Design podcast, the show dedicated to helping parents navigate the ups and downs of raising children while building a thriving family life. With a background in educational psychology, years of experience as a teacher and principal, and a dedicated parent coach and mentor, Ben brings you practical insights, heartfelt advice, and real-life stories to help you face everyday parenting challenges with confidence and purpose. Whether you're looking to connect more deeply with your kids, support their academic success, nurture their emotional well-being, or simply find moments of peace in the chaos, this podcast is here to guide you. Now, here's your host, Ben McCarthy.
Welcome to this episode of Thrive by Design. In this episode, we will be dealing with dyslexia. What is dyslexia? What are the common misconceptions around dyslexia, the importance of early detections, and some strategies and support for you as parents as well as teachers. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce someone very special. Not just because she's an expert remedial therapist and a dyslexia specialist, but because she's also my better half. Tanya McCarthy is the heart and soul behind the Turning Point. They help children unlock their potential to thrive in the classroom. And, lucky for me, I get to call her my wife. So let's dive into her world of expertise and discover more about dyslexia. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode, Tan.
Hi Ben, and thanks so much for having me here. You know how much dyslexia is my passion project and how much I love to help parents and teachers navigate this difficult space for their children. So I'm excited to be able to share hopefully some helpful insights that will guide them through the process.
So the first question I would like to ask you is, what is dyslexia?
I suppose, like with all things in life, one of the easiest ways to understand what something is to consider what it's not. And for many people, dyslexia is simply reversing letters like B and D, or actually not being able to read at all. And dyslexia is so much more than that. By definition, dyslexia is an umbrella term that refers to the difficulties learning to read and write. It is important to clarify there that there would be no other reason for those difficulties. For example, the child is not experiencing major health complications that has caused them to avoid, to miss a large chunk of school. So difficulties learning to read and write with no other reason for those difficulties.
Are there any common misconceptions regarding dyslexia?
Well, yes, actually, there's a whole list. Definitely top of that list, as I already mentioned, is people believe that dyslexia is simply reversing letters like B and D, and there is so much more to it than that. There's also the very strong belief that people with dyslexia can never learn to read and write effectively, and this is simply not true. People with dyslexia can and often do learn to read and write very well. One of the myths about dyslexia that makes me really sad is that so many people believe that dyslexia is actually linked to intelligence, which results in the belief that people with dyslexia are less intelligent. And this is simply not true. In fact, quite the opposite is true. Many people with dyslexia are incredibly intelligent. And then one of the other myths about dyslexia that I find quite popular in schools is that it's very uncommon. And it's not. Teachers, if you're listening, you need to know that statistics show 20% of our population struggles with dyslexia, and that's not just in South Africa, it's worldwide. That means 1 in 5 children in a class of 25 is struggling with dyslexia, and in a bigger class of 35 or 40 children, that's 7 or 8 students in every classroom. So it really is prevalent in our schools today.
Would you say that early detection of dyslexia is important, and what are the signs that you should look out for in dyslexia?
Absolutely. Ben, if you think about early detection in any physical illness, you will automatically realize that the chances of recovery are so much better if you treat it quickly. And it's exactly the same with dyslexia. Early intervention makes all the difference in the world. One of the beautiful things about dyslexia, if you could call it that, is that you can see the signs and symptoms of it, so to speak, as early as preschool. So if you have a little one in preschool, you need to be looking out for things like children struggling to learn nursery rhymes, children struggling to learn and recite the alphabet. Perhaps they muddle up the pronunciation of words, not difficult words, but words that they should know. They might have trouble telling direction, and again, age-appropriate direction, so up and down. They might forget names of people and things that they should know. And then something which is quite easy to spot in a preschool classroom is that the little ones might have struggle sequencing. And so an activity like sequencing colored beads in a specific order would be particularly difficult for them. It does change as children get older, and so in primary school, one of the strongest indicators of dyslexia would be what we call a spiky profile. And this is where a child has particular strengths in certain areas. For example, they might have an incredible ability to learn about history, but they have distinct weaknesses in other areas like reading and spelling. Things that parents and teachers could look out for at school would include difficulty following multiple sets of instructions, forgetting words, again, words that they should know. Their written work would not be on par with what you would believe to be their potential. Yes, there is the element of confusing some letters. One of the things that always stands out for me, especially in written work, is that a child who has dyslexia will most likely spell the same word in multiple different ways in one piece of writing. And then there's the typical signs like unusual pronunciation with reading, children who avoid reading, their reading is labored, they have difficulty understanding what they read, and very interestingly, there would be difficulty with working memory as well, because dyslexia does often impact working memory. I do think it's important to add a disclaimer here that we need to understand all children at some point will struggle with school in one way or another. That's only natural. A child with dyslexia will present consistent difficulties in certain areas, and so we need to allow for that. By the time children reach high school, the telltale sign of dyslexia is often the discrepancy between their verbal ability and what they put on paper. And high school teachers will often be able to tell you they know that child is just so clever. They know they have so much potential, but they just don't put it down on paper. So they're going to give you a 3-word answer instead of 3 sentences.
Tan, thank you so much. When it comes to the early detection and the importance thereof, how would a delayed diagnosis affect a child's emotional, academic and social development?
Yes, absolutely, Ben. Undiagnosed dyslexia can have disastrous effects on our children. When the children are younger, many of them, funny enough, manage to develop coping skills to hide their struggles. Added to that is the fact that teachers might actually miss the red flags, either because they don't know what they are or because the little ones hide it so well. And then all too often, parents don't want their children to be labeled, which as teachers, you and I both know, is probably a whole conversation for another day. But what happens is all of this leaves a child feeling lost, alone, and even though we don't like the word, it often leaves them feeling very stupid. By the age of grade 3, our children know all too well that they're struggling to keep up with their classmates, regardless of what the adults in their world say or don't say. And so our children might start avoiding schoolwork. Homework will become a struggle. It might even become a fight at home, which is just awful for everyone. And sadly, children might start avoiding school altogether. You know, the proverbial sore tummy in the mornings or tears at the school gate. And what makes me really sad is that sometimes it gets so bad that our children will withdraw from friends and family, even social settings, just because they don't feel good enough to be there.
So clearly it is very important for an early assessment or a screening to see if your child might be struggling with dyslexia. What types of assessments or screenings are available for dyslexia? And when do you recommend parents seek professional help?
So Ben, to answer your question there, early intervention is absolutely essential. as we said earlier, even with a physical ailment, early treatment makes all the difference in the world, and it's the same with dyslexia. So seek help as soon as you think your child might be struggling. The worst thing you can ever do is to fall into the trap of thinking or believing that your child will catch up later. They often don't. They just fall further and further behind, and the gap gets bigger and bigger. So get help immediately. In terms of the assessments you were asking about, I would recommend that parents or teachers start with a screening test, and there are many trained professionals who can do screening tests for you. A screening test will not diagnose dyslexia though, but it will guide you in terms of intervention and what help is needed. And then following on from that, you would see an educational psychologist who would be able to make the diagnosis for you. They obviously use a full battery of assessments. That's very important and helpful. But also what's nice for parents to know is that the EdPsych won't diagnose dyslexia before there have been 6 months of targeted intervention, which makes the previous step of the screening assessment really helpful.
When we're looking at strategies and support for parents and teachers, how can we create a supportive environment for children with?
Definitely just accept the child for who they are. Don't get impatient with them. One of the most difficult things about dyslexia is it can be terribly frustrating for the adults in the child's world, because a little one with dyslexia can often have done the work yesterday, but today they cannot do exactly the same work. And so that is very frustrating because we simply don't understand why. But it's not the child's fault. And so adults, we need to make sure that our children do not see or feel our frustration. Always love and encourage them and praise their efforts, even if the results are not what we were hoping for. Remember that the effort that goes into reading for children with dyslexia is incredible. It's intense for them. And so we need to make sure that we're praising their efforts and not looking at the results. Parents, make reading time special for your children. Make it something that they will treasure and remember, not just for the book, but for the time spent with you. And so a piece of advice I always give parents would be sit on the couch with them, make some tea or even hot chocolate, and cuddle them while reading, because this is giving them a sense of safety and security while tackling a task that is very hard for them. One of my close friends' favorite memories of learning to read was reading in a pirate ship in her grade 1 classroom. In reality, the pirate ship was most likely just a cardboard box with a slap of paint, but what my friend remembers is feeling safe and happy there, and she has linked this particular memory to her love of books. So teachers, that's a simple idea for your classroom, but again, teachers, whatever you do, and I'm literally begging you, please do not make struggling readers read out loud in the classroom. It is so unnecessary and, dare I say, even old-fashioned. Yes, I know, you need to hear them read, but why not let them record their reading and send that to you? Because then it's done in their safe space and it's not a scary activity for them.
I couldn't concur with you more. Even being a language teacher myself, you could often see children struggle to do a public speaking in public or to do reading in public, and it's often just a good idea to keep them behind or ask them to pop in sometime during the course of the day and do that speech or do that reading in the privacy of your classroom without their friends being present. Are there any specific tools, teaching strategies or programs you find particularly effective for helping children with dyslexia?
There is so much help available to parents and teachers today. One of the most accessible tools or programs for teachers and parents is actually Nessie. They have a website, nessie.com, and on there you will find a host of short courses and teaching resources, as well as a full-on reading program that's available. The added bonus of Nessie is that a lot of it is for free, but it will certainly leave you with a firm understanding or a firm grasp on dyslexia and what it is and how you can help your children. In terms of teaching strategies, you've got to keep the learning interesting and engaging. when you have a child who is involved in learning in a multisensory environment, they are going to learn and take on so much more and remember so much more than just with a pen and paper. So if they're learning their spelling at home, don't expect them to write it in a book. Let them write it in flour on the kitchen counter, or shaving cream, or write it on the window with window paint, and it does wash off, so don't worry about it. But definitely keep the learning engaging. In the classroom, it's a bit more difficult to have, 20 or 30 or even 40 children writing on your windows, but you could just slide a piece of sandpaper under their book, and that gives them sensory feedback while they're writing. So there's so much that you can do, but those are definitely the two things. Yeah, keep learning active or engaging and interesting.
I firmly believe that we've got some listeners here that have got children that are possibly struggling with dyslexia, and I believe in hope. Do you perhaps have a real life story you could share with us? A success story of a child you may have taught that had dyslexia and with a successful outcome?
There's so many stories I could share with you, but I'll keep it to just one. There was a particular little girl I met when she was just starting grade 2. And when I tell you she couldn't read a single word, I mean she couldn't read a single word. Not even the easy words like cat and dog. It was heartbreaking for her, and obviously for her mom as well. Her mom had to, get to grips with understanding and accepting that her daughter had severe dyslexia. And that is something that all parents struggle with. None of us ever want to believe that there is anything wrong with our children. So this mum faced the same decision that so many other parents have faced somewhere along their journey. She could pretend that it didn't exist. She could fight the school and she could fight the system. Or she could embrace the help and support that was offered to her, and she wisely chose the latter. So through some difficult days came some small victories. Slowly, this little girl got to grips with decoding words, and eventually she started reading paragraphs and even comprehensions. With continued support over the years, this particular child received an academic award at the end of grade 5 at school last year. So it really can work. It can be a success story, and there is so much hope for parents and for our children.
As we're coming to the end of this episode, we have realized the importance of early intervention. Picking up the signs, the red flags, and then doing something about it. What resources or organizations do you recommend for parents who suspect their child maybe have dyslexia?
Well, Ben, most schools will have a school-based support team, so reach out to them. Reach out to them for guidance, reach out to them for support. Then in Johannesburg particularly, we are so blessed to have schools like Bella Vista and Crossroads that have assessment units available to all children. So not just their school children, anyone can go to them for help and advice. And of course, you're always welcome to reach out to us. Just jump onto our website. There's a little WhatsApp button on the right-hand side, and send us a message. We would love to engage with you and help and guide you through this difficult process.
So, to the listeners, just to reiterate, Tan, with her experience, more than willing to assist you. Please go visit their website. It's www.theturningpoint.co.za. Is there anything else you'd like our listeners to know about dyslexia?
So 2 things, Ben. One, I'd say to parents is you're not alone in your struggles, and you shouldn't be feeling alone either. Many parents are walking the same or at least a similar road to you. There are many professionals who are able and willing to assist, so please reach out. And then probably a closing thought, and I'll say it again, I cannot emphasize it enough. If you suspect that your child is struggling, don't wait. Get help. Get help today. The earlier you intervene, the better the chances of success you will experience.
Tan, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge with us. To the listeners, I'm sure they look at this and go, okay, my child's got dyslexia. Through faith, through prayer and support, we can do this together. So just from my side to say thank you very much to you. Thank you for joining us for this episode.
Thank you so much for having me, Ben. You know how much I love helping parents and children. I hope the information we've spoken about here has been helpful and insightful for parents and for teachers. And again, anyone needing help or wanting to chat further is most welcome to reach out.
That's it for this episode of Thrive by Design. If this episode encouraged you, please share it with another parent who might need it. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast or Ben's newsletter for more parenting insights and inspiration. Remember, you're doing better than you think. God's got you, and together we can thrive by design.